Okay.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. We're here with my new favorite people on earth. You guys introduce yourselves and tell everybody what you do.
I'll start. I am Kaylee Moody. I currently work for Habitat for Humanity of North Central Georgia as their Associate Director of Community Relations, and I live in Atlanta, and I did campus ministry a few years ago. So,
Thank
Great.
you.
I'm Nevalie Hawkins. I currently am in my second year internship at Sojourn Collegiate Ministry in Boston, Massachusetts, on the Tufts University and Lesley University campuses.
Awesome.
And I'm Lance Barrett. I currently work at the Georgia Tech Research Institute. I graduated last semester. My last 2 semesters, I got to be a part of Georgia Tech's Christian Campus Fellowship, their college ministry here. And that's actually where I'm at now. I live here now.
Love it. Thank y'all for joining me. So this is I have had listening sessions, but I haven't recorded any of them before. So this is our first official recorded listening session for people who are younger, who love Jesus and love his bride. You know, Jesus calls the church his bride, and that's fascinating. And at times frustrated with the current model, but want to see the kingdom of heaven come to earth. And so this is what this is all about, is trying to listen to younger people and hear what you guys have to say about your friends, your peers, what you think, y'all coming from the South, what do y'all want? And how can we just listen better to what it is that, the people that you're rubbing shoulders with, what do they need? And so we were in a fascinating conversation about that. And I hate that I wasn't recording earlier, but here we go. I'd love to hear, again, we're not trying to like knock on the church, but what do you want to see for the church of tomorrow? Like, what is it that your heart and your heart for your friends, your heart for you, like, what do you want to see in the church of tomorrow?
I will start again. For me personally, I think I'm very, very lucky to have found a church that does embrace authentic community. Like people show up as they are. We have people who walk in the door who look very fancy every Sunday, and we have people who come very casual. And we've got people from a wide range of political beliefs, even former religious beliefs. And just it's a very diverse crowd. And I like that people do not seem to have to put on a mask when they come in the door. And in general, like the pastor does a good job of striking a tone that is both authoritative and instructive, but caring and compassionate. And I think that the church I go to and does a really good job of embracing the whole person, which is something that I would like to see every church do. Especially because I grew up in a Baptist church that was not that way, that you walk in the door and you felt like you had to act a certain way, say certain things, or you were going to be judged and probably not welcomed in. So yeah, that's one of my first thoughts.
So diverse, genuine, welcoming, everybody in every spectrum, every part of every spectrum welcome.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think specifically here in New England, I would say that we probably need more individuals who are willing to help redefine or just reimagine what a church community can be. And I think that means being willing to be a church leader themselves. I think to be a little bit more specific, in Sojourn, we work with pre-faith students, and a lot of those students would never set foot into a church. And there are a lot of, we discussed this a little bit earlier, but a lot of churches that I attend, I walk in the door and immediately feel as if I'm trying to be like one into their community. And a lot of times I don't feel comfortable considering bringing students into that community. And so I think a big piece of what we've had to imagine at our community in Sojourn is how do we introduce our students to what church could be without bringing them to a place where they don't necessarily feel welcome. And so that can look like like I talked about earlier, that can look like introducing them to what a meaningful and genuine community looks like by having dinner every Thursday and engaging in deep and meaningful conversation. It can also look like, okay, let's have this conversation and let's make a piece of art that represents, what you believe in. And so redefining these classic characteristics of church, like worship and sermons and communion, and helping just make these terms and concepts much more accessible to students and young people who may have been hurt by the church or have never been introduced to the concepts to begin with. And so I think it just requires people taking more or having more incentive or just taking the responsibility to help make these things accessible to young people instead of just bringing them to a church where they're not going to feel welcome or they're never going to want to come back.
Mm. Yeah, because it's a lot easier, quote unquote, to just take someone's hand and walk them into a church and be like, they've already figured everything out. Let's just sit here. But you're saying, no, step up and lead and innovate and try something new and introduce people to that.
Yes.
Love that.
Yeah, yeah, I love that heart of like encouraging a body to lead, because ways that like from our previous conversation that I'm currently experiencing how the church is kind of like breaking my heart or like letting me down is in a personal example of how my parents are going through a really horrible divorce right now. And like I continue to walk in the church and everyone knows about it, but they're uncomfortable to talk about it. They're uncomfortable to bring it up. And I'm not sure if there's this idea that, oh, there's someone else that's going to be there for Lance and his family.
Mm.
And I just don't think that's just the way to do it. I think to be genuine, to be able to be like, I know like how things are going. Is there any way that I can help and support? Kind of like bringing to life like what we're reading on Sundays, right? It's like outdoing one another in love. Or if like the body's hurt, the rest of the body, like if I stub my toe, all of my being is going to take care of my toe. And why are we not seeing that? And like a part of it is because like like what is the bandwidth of the current church like system? Is like, I mean, the pastor can only do so much, the outreach pastor can only do so much, but if we have a church body that like takes initiative and they're leaders themselves doing this, like, oh, that's viable, that's sustainable. That doesn't is We're not limited anymore by a church staff's bandwidth, but rather the entire church body's bandwidth, which is much bigger.
Mm.
And it might be slower, to grow a community that like to like disciple people, like, and invest in people that then invest in more people themselves, that they become nodes themselves. But I think in terms of like ways that the church can meet the needs, I think it's that exact thing, Neville. I think you just hit that perfectly. Thanks, great.
Well said. Lance, share with us again the NFL quote you had from earlier. So good. It's like glitter in my mind. It's so good.
Yeah, I love it too. Thank you so much for bringing that up. It's in terms of like I brought this up in the previous conversation of like outdoing one another in love. There's a lot of like evils in this world, and we need to do everything we can to fight against it, right? Just with ferocity. And I think there's just too much timidity. And so there's this really funny like 60 Minutes interview of this like tight end from the NFL. He says like that's why we don't win games. It's because we have linebackers that eat with forks and knives. We don't need linebackers like that. You can't win games like that. We need linebackers to eat with their hands. And it's like that's the thing is like, yes, it's uncomfortable, but I'm gonna step over the discomfort and say, how can I help you? I just like in a more practical sense, like my mom like needed space and was actively looking for a place to live, right?
Mm.
In this messy divorce. There's 200 people in that church. They knew about it. They couldn't open up a basement or a couch.
Mm.
Why? Like, I'm angry, but I'm going to slow down. I'm going to ask why. Is it because you didn't want to get your hands dirty? Are you joking? Like, a divorce is very painful. It's ripping our family apart. And I'm disappointed that no one showed up. And that's very convicting to me because then it's like, I want to show up for people.
Mm.
And so then I have that ferocity to like, let's go. Let's go win games. Let's go win hearts for the Lord. Let's go outdo one another in love. But then I'm running into that wall of my personal bandwidth. And so it's like, okay, well, how do we expand that? And then like Neville, when you were talking about like genuine, like leading from where we are as a church body. Oh, our bandwidth is big. It's going to be slower, but I think it's going to be more robust, more viable. And yeah, it's kind of like what they said in Acts. Like they said, they broke bread with one another and they like sold their possessions to help support one another. I mean, come out and play. It's so good.
That's
So
right.
yeah,
It's so
that's the
good.
NFL quote.
It's so good. Yes. I love it. Get our hands dirty. Like, what's holding us back? Like, why are we pretending? Hearing, what are we hearing? And why is it not reflecting in what we're doing? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like invite sanctification. Yes, it hurts, but what else are we going to be doing if not becoming more like Jesus?
Right.
And Lance, I think what you're saying is, I mean, so important and it's so true. I think too, it's exactly why then looking from the outside, it's exactly why young people would see it and say like, that's hypocritical. Like here's these things that you are preaching and here's these things in turn that you are going to judge me for. But then,
Mhm.
but then you're not going to open up your home to somebody who's a part of your family, like that kind of thing. And so I think it's so true. Like these are things like we do need to step up where we're at also in order to, show other people that this is truly how we want to be and act as Christians is
Yes.
legitimately hospitable and caring to the people who are in our community
Yeah.
and outside of our community.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
love
I
that.
think jumping off of that point real quick, because Lance, you're talking about within the church community, which is incredibly important. It's like first look after your own members. But then I think too, churches can fall into the other trap of becoming too insular and not thinking
Mm.
outside of their walls and thinking outside of their community of like, we're part of not just like a little local church, we're part of a broader city, a broader
Mm.
state, a broader, like, so is there anything we can do as a church body to go serve people outside of these walls? And so like I really admire churches who have kind of taken after the whole like they've really invested in creating servant leaders and have like spread that idea among their members of like, hey, on a Sunday we're actually going to go serve the homeless, or like we're going to go do a soup kitchen for people, we're going to go like actively engage with our community and meet a physical need, because I think like one of the easiest ways to reach people is by showing that you care about them as a person, like their physical needs, right? Even
Mhm.
maybe before spiritual needs. I think, a lot of people are hesitant to accept spiritual advice, but if you can sit there and practically say, okay, you're hungry, like, let me feed you, like they're more receptive. And then of course there is just like, as Christians, we should be, filled with compassion when we see people who are not as fortunate. So that's something I would also like to see more churches take on, is like, how do we serve other communities, like multiply our community that way.
Definitely. It's also, then continuing that in ministry, I found also that like service is also really the most common ground a lot of times between those who are Christians and non-Christians. Like
Mm.
that truly is a way that we make connection with a lot of our students is by here. We're going to be doing this service opportunity every Tuesday. Would you like to join us? And I think one, it proves that, okay, we practice what we preach, but also it is this surprising common ground where, okay, we can invite you into this community so that we together can go out and serve. So I do think also it is a way that actually like brings together people of different faiths in a very beautiful way.
Yeah, something happens when sometimes this is too much face to face, but when you're doing something together side by side, I think that's why I love like going on road trips with my kids or going running with my son, or something where my daughter and I, we thrift shop. It's like we're doing something together, and then there's just so much. It feels like we're on mission together, right? So we're gonna talk and get to know each other better instead of this like pressure of who are you, what do you believe, this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So we've talked about community and we've talked about mission, which is awesome. So this community idea of genuine, get your hands dirty, love each other community. We've talked about mission, like churches that are on mission, not just inside to have a genuine community, but out in the community doing something that matters, that changes things for the community. So then talk to me about worship. We kind of hit on this in our earlier conversation, but I think this is a fascinating concept that Christian culture, we cannot separate from what is Christian culture and what is of Jesus. And so we're like, we think of worship in one way. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, I talked a little bit about this earlier. I think it was coming out of a conversation about frustration about, I guess, just Christian-centered language and common phrases and words that are really more regurgitated by people rather than used in an accurate or like genuine context. And I think it also then lends itself to in church, we've created these very strict definitions of what each aspect of church means and what it should look like. And so that be like the sermon, you get up there for 30 minutes and we, have one verse that we're going to talk about and we're going to give you a takeaway at the end of the day. But then also worship being something that you have a worship pastor who stands up at the front and usually he'll sing at you, and great, we're all going to sing together and put our hands up and it's going to be very moving. And for some people it is. Like for some people that is a very genuine form of worship for them. But it also it really boxes you in because then when you think of worship, it's okay, here's this one way I can relate to my faith, but then we totally shy away from all of these other ways that we can express worship. And I think I talked a little bit about this earlier, but just speaking about what we do after hours with our students, where we provide them canvases and we just allow them to say, okay, use this to paint what you're feeling this week. Use this to paint what you need to let go of. All of these things they might be things where in the Christian world, we might use different language or we might express a little bit differently, but we tried to cater it in a way or again, just make it more accessible to students who don't believe or are pre-faith in our pre-faith journey and trying to change that definition and not change, I guess, because that is what worship is, but I think again, move away from the definition that the modern church has created of things like worship, communion, sermons, etc.
Right on. Lance, Kaylee, what do you think?
I've had very similar thoughts to Neville of like, I don't always love the model of show up to church on a Sunday morning and worship for 20 minutes with the band and then hear a sermon from the same person every week. I really enjoy other forms of worship, like getting out in nature and hiking, for instance. And I know that I feel very at peace when I'm near the ocean and really like can genuinely reflect on just how big and powerful God is when I'm sitting there standing like in front of a mountain or in front of the ocean. And I know that's not practical for everyone because it's like they can't just go to a mountain every single Sunday. But I think it would be really cool if churches kind of experiment with the idea of like, can we create worship in other contexts? Can we, find ways to open like spaces for people to commune with God that doesn't just look like a sermon on Sunday morning or, worship service. I've had many of my friends express that they don't enjoy singing. So for them, it's not a way for them to connect to God because they're just kind of stressed the whole time about like, am I sounding okay? And I don't really even feel connected to God. And so like, what does that mean about my heart posture? And it ends up becoming a lot more stressful for them than something where they, genuinely feel close to God. So I don't exactly know what that looks like because on a Sunday morning, it's like you have your standard programming because that's easy and that's efficient, and you make sure that people are actually going to show up. Because if you're changing locations every single week, like, oh, let's go to the mountain, it's like, right, how's that going to practically work? But I think at least maybe opening up more spaces during the week for people to connect with God in other ways. Like, the art church is a beautiful idea of like Tuesday nights, let's get together and just paint something that reflects where we're at in life right now. Or Thursday morning, let's go hike together. Like just finding ways to engage with God outside of Sunday morning.
Yeah, like I love those because it's like Neville, while you were describing that, the word that kept popping up in my head is how prescribed it all is and how like overly structured it is and almost like losing the heart of it. I mean, I've been like so overjoyed that I start singing. I mean, just put me in any college football game. You know what I mean? Like then I'll start singing. So like that's like the overflow of my heart and my joy is to like sing. But when it's like what caused me to sing, rather than I need to be told to sing right now, like kind of like looking at it that way. And like Haley, what you were describing of like like one day it could be this, one day it could be this. Then I started thinking about like what is worship actually? It's like adoring and like just an overflow of my love and affection for being loved and receiving the affection from the Lord. And it's like if it's so prescribed, then it's only on Sundays. Then my definition of worship is only when like these people get on stage and then they tell us to sing for 20 minutes, and like that's what worship becomes. And that's really not what it is. It's like I'm in awe and wonder of like God all the time. And
Mm,
it's like, I'm going to live life worthy of the gospel. I'm not going to live a Sunday morning worthy of the gospel. It's like a life worthy of that. And so, like, then, like, it needs to be done throughout the week. And so then it's like, why does the church do that now? It's the natural question in my hand. And then maybe just because, like, I'm just trying to confirm my own biases, but it's just like the church staff is how many? The church body is how many? Is that the maximum bandwidth they're able to do? But if the church body is doing all of this, then like little nodes start doing like little church like communities within. It's just like we like art, we like hiking, we like music, and then that natural community that's like it's self-propelling within the church body starts doing that throughout the week. You're living life together. You're not living Sunday morning anymore together. So I think in terms of like worship, it's adoring the Lord from his like love for us. That needs to be done all the time. And so yeah, just being able to be in a community that explores all of those ways, yeah, like what you guys are saying is like really cool. And it just I want a church body that leads from that place,
mm,
like together,
Feels much more organic the way you painted that picture.
mm,
Yeah. And I've heard a lot of people say like in